evening, everybody. My name is Eric Parkinson. I'm the programming director at the Gloucester Writers Center. I want to thank you for joining us for what is basically the final reading of our summer season. Next week, we'll have an end of summer open mic at 126 East Main Street. So if you've been writing stories or poems this summer, please come by and share. Our little center with the big pencil on the side. I don't know if you've seen it. Can't miss it. So we're running a later program than we usually do, so I'm going to do my best to shorten my usually meandering, usually overlong introductions. So tonight's program, I'm extremely excited to be presenting Melissa Green and Charles Coe. Both of these widely published and deeply beloved poets are presenting new work, some new work, yes? And Charles is presenting his new and selected poems just out from Leapfrog Press. It's been my habit in introductions not to review a writer's bona fides, but to give you a readerly sense of what I've experienced looking at their work. So in reading them, I've been thinking about the idea of masks present to my mind in both their bodies of work, and so I think that that's kind of the unofficial theme of the evening. Poetry is liberating mask. So let me start by introducing Melissa Green. Melissa Green's writerly voice is sonorous, flowing, liquid. In her books, poetry feels as if it's a river in which you might dip a ladle at any time and come up with the stuff of life, something sustaining and cool. The image is undoubtedly in mind because of her Squanicook eclogues. That river appears and is a figure of longing and relationship to the earth throughout the book. Listen to this from the end of August 2. I heard an ancient, urgent fury break the snow, a fierce quicksilvering of winter's crusted dike. I watched it runnel gently where we crouched. Its wake defied the valley, joyfully sped from where we gazed. I felt the shrugging off of nature's deep disguise. The river favored us. She lived and leapt the gorge. Melissa Green's facility with hexameter gives the voice its epic scale, even while the content brings us down into the life of a family, while acknowledging that a family is always a metaphor for some truer relationship to the world. That penultimate line, I felt the shrugging off of nature's deep disguise, feels to me like it might be Green's credo. Forgive my obtuse language here, but nature and our natures are the masks that some truer nature wears. In Green's poetry, the mask slips. Thank God. Melissa Green.
Do I need to move this? I can shout?
Nope. I was getting cheese.
You were getting cheese. That's far more important. Oops.
Is that all right?
Okay, sure. I think you can probably hear me, but I usually don't sit down. For some reason, tonight I'm sitting down. I'm so glad you all came. It's really wonderful for me to see all of your faces. And I've wanted to read here at Gloucester for about 75 years, I'd say. And I have to thank Eric for arranging it, and my friend Dossie Campbell, who the two of them got together and had a little conflab, and all of a sudden I was reading. So I'm very glad to read with Charles Coe, whom I didn't know until tonight, but his reputation has preceded him. So I'm very delighted to read with him and see his book. You're very lucky to be able to get his book, and you should all buy poets' books when you see them, because it doesn't take long for them to go into the ether and they disappear. I have new and selected poems, but it's 10 years old, and it doesn't breathe on the planet anywhere. So buy Charles's book. I recommend, because you can't buy mine. Excuse me. I love Gloucester. I used to come up here many, many, many times in my life. I grew up sort of halfway between the Worcester Hills and Winthrop, which is sort of an island with two causeways sort of underneath the airport. It's not a place you actually go to unless you live there, because it's just you have no reason to go there. But it was right on the water, and when I had to leave Winthrop 5 years ago, It broke my heart, and the hardest thing was not giving up a house I loved or 6 rooms full of books that I also loved. It was giving up the smell of the salt in the air and the smell of the sea and being so close to it. And now when it rains in Brookline, a nice, very nice place to live, and I don't smell the salt in the air, I literally don't know where I am on the planet. I lose my balance. It's like the horizon tips. I need to smell the salt. So I'm very happy to be here tonight. And the little place that I lived besides Winthrop was a tiny chicken farm in the Worcester Hills, right on the border of New Hampshire. And in those days, I thought, well, we live in Massachusetts. It's far superior to any place on the planet. I didn't get out much when I was 10. The Squanicook Eclogues that Eric referred to is, young poets often write elegies. I know I wrote thousands of them, and the Squanicook Eclogues was my elegy for my father. And it's too long to read to you tonight, although someday I'll read to somebody, but I'm just going to pluck pieces out and to give you a clue about what it's like. So my father and I used to walk the property. We had 50 acres of woods and all the farm buildings, and we used to walk the property often, and it gave me a huge sense of proportion and Mother Nature, and it was very important that I had that. I was lucky enough to have that. So I'm just going to read a few pieces from the Squanicook Eclogues. And these are all, as Eric mentioned, hexameter, and they're all couplets with slant rhymes. Not that you need to know all that. We walked the property 1,000 times, as if without our walking there, the landscape might dissolve. His trees were young. A dry summer spark had cleared the western third some time ago, and when he could, he meant to have that forest back. He planted spruce the size of children's pencils, 1,500 sprays of evergreen, each year as spindly as the last. It hurt to watch him tearing up the ones he'd lost. We carried water from the brook sometimes. It sluiced a dozen clotted paths where once an ancestor sliced the forest open, and oxen, yoked, had dragged a road. This was ours. New Hampshire, north of us, was broad and diffident as France. With vague disdain at 6, I knew our woods were better. Even my burdock socks belonged to Massachusetts. And I loved our field where 100-year-old hair had not been cut. It filled with captivated birds. I watched a thorny orchard kept a dozen wizards prisoner. I watched their script of runes engrave the granite sky with ancient debt. Everything the woods could teach, my father taught. Delight, exactitude, a faith, his journeyman's doubt. More than novelty crooked its finger, silent, austere, deeper than trees beating their wings, or the stare of a black snake circumscribing a sapling's wrist. Father carefully penciled facts, describing rust, habitat, genus, disease, but his meticulous chart of change didn't teach me to name the wood's mysterious heart. Father, I'm frightened. Why are things so beautiful and sad? My voice had dusted moss like snow without a sound. Stern and tall, he cupped his chin. As if in pain, he paused, then reached into his pocket for a pen. Don't ever make things up, he said. Write only what you see. Name the woods, and you'll have named the world. He tore some pages off and handed me his pad. I heard the current crimp on the pond, and larch or beach or birds murmuring over me. The task was how to write birch when I saw the crumbling, pale tusk of a fallen mastodon bridging the path, or when the air was frenzied with the head of her neighbor's rain-black mare. Sycamore waved at me like drowned Ophelia's hair. Something stirred from sleep as we passed by. It woke and shook itself. I saw it light the linden's wicks and heard it leafing through a coded archive. Heard an earth-brown collared killdeer beat its feathers hard. I knew the spirit of 1,000 seasons rose to welcome us, so long in coming through the trees. Oh, it's okay. Thank you. I have some shorter poems to read. It's very dry, and pardon me for needing water. If Mother Nature isn't in my poems, the classical world is, and I just, that's because what I live for. I live for it, I hunger for it, I use it all the time. So this poem is called Daphne in Mourning. Daphne was a young nymph who was being chased by Apollo, the sun god, and she kept saying, no, 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 I want none of you and none of this. And she finally called her father and said, please, please do something about this god who's chasing me. And you've probably seen that there's a beautiful Renaissance statue of Daphne reaching into her hair, and she pulls out her hands full of leaves. Her hands have turned to leaves, her hair has turned to leaves. She turns into a tree, the Daphne, sorry, that's no one. And I always wondered if the crowns that the athletes were given in the Olympic Games came from the tree that she was turned into. So this is Daphne when she was quite a bit older. Palm fronds have woven out the sky. Fog has infiltrated every vein. My hair has interlaced with vines. Cobwebs lash their gauze across my eyes. I've stood so since the world began and turned almost to stone some years ago. Who passes by perceives a lichened post, my girlish features ghostly, nearly gone. My bark is warmer than the dead's. Human blood still lulls the underside of leaves. My fingers hold the very dress I loved to dance in when dancing mattered, and it did. Let's see. I want to read you a poem called Salt Box in Vermont. Wood stove, 2 desks kissing, books, the latest in a series of sunset-colored dogs, our tall sons, their stair-step children stamping off snow, the holiday table groaning with our work, vegetables, poetry, merriment. It never happened. The house, the erver, the husband holding me older. Illness married me, first and forever, put me to bed like a bad child. Daily, through rain's quicksilver, I count on an abacus of crows. Let's see, I would read. This is a poem about writing, which I don't always write about that, but it comes up every once in a while. It's called The Eater of Paper, the Drinker of Ink. With my pen point, I dig up the watermark, a white peony soft on my tongue. In that sweet wafer, I taste a cluster of birches, cherry, oak. I swallow acres of forest, seed pods like limpets at my heart. The nib plunges into a black current. Its unguent on my lips, I suck down the streets of Evangeline, the drowned parishes of Katrina. These lines, an alphabet drawn from a corpse's single alchemized hair. And let's see. In December, we lost a great friend of poetry, the 99-year-old David Ferry, who was a great poet in his own right and a wonderful translator of the Aeneid and other classical pieces. And this is a poem I wrote for him. He heard me read it several times and always gave me a big bus on the cheek because it meant something that I had written this poem. And it starts out with that iconic picture of two soldiers carrying their fallen comrade away. And greaves are the protective armor on the thighs of soldiers. Asclepius was in the classical world, he was probably the first doctor. So imagine a massed unit somewhere in the world, and then all of the names it's an alphabetical listing of all the names of battles and wars over the course of our lives, and there are many. I didn't get them all. This is called Casualty. They carried him from the sea on his shield, his greaves gushing what he thought were golden fish. He did not know the ones who bore him, nor which of Poseidon's horses frothed at their bits. Asclepius rolled back his white sleeves. There was incarnadine clotting the water, gouts of blood on the sandals of the stretcher bearers. There was nothing to be done. They carried him across the moors, the mossy stones, Actium, Ardennes, Bannockburn, Borodino. Along the marshy bank, the footpaths rising up, Bosworth Field, Bull Run, Crécy. Over the starlight daisies in the field grass of the vineyard, Constantinople, Corregidor, East Timor. Beside the ivied trees, under the theater of the moon, Damascus, Da Nang, Dresden, Dunkirk. They carried him through the shady groves of the Great Plains, Gallipoli, Hiroshima, Jerusalem, Kabul, the murmuring of cypresses urging them on, Kandahar, Kaysan, Leipzig, My the stretcher bearers printing the clay of Asia Minor, Nanking, Persepolis, Phnom Penh, Poitiers, through the tree trunks where the trail dissolved, the siege of Acre, the siege of Austerlitz, The mud, now frozen ruts on mountainsides. The siege of Leningrad. The siege of Sarajevo. They followed the snowy lanes through sleepy villages. Verdun, Vukovar, Wounded Knee. They carried him under the rustling live oaks, cross over the river, and rest in the shade of elm and yews, the blue-gray mists of Shiloh, drenching every decomposing grave. Thank you, that's very kind. I'm going to read a few new poems and then I'll get out of your hair. I'm finding this time of life, I just turned 70, I'm finding this time of life quite difficult, actually. It isn't just the vanity, it's just things happen and your body becomes something other than what you've always known it to be, and you still feel as though you're 25, and you always will. It's just your body doesn't believe it and won't let you believe it. So I'll try to read a couple of poems. This is called The Widow Summer, and the head of the Charles is a international regatta that they play on the Charles River every year on the 1st of November, I think, and millions of people show up. I know because I was caught in a traffic light, and I spent 3 hours at a traffic light, and I was too far away to see the sellers, but I was right in the middle of all the people yelping and jumping for joy. So this has a, all that fire denied in me, who has denied desire. That's from Theodore Roethke. And the migratory moon carries a rucksack on its back, tramping the damply shadowed meadows, looking for you. The pyramids of the Green Mountains showed you the path away from the coast, which cost your heart too much to stay. The breeze wheezes autumn into the Adirondacks. Oak leaves crayon on the clouds, this declension, loss, losses, lost. Above the cobbles of Beacon Hill, shutters shudder on Revere Street, on joy. The last of the Boston Brahmins muttering under their tongues, Ivy's utterance tap-tapping on blood-colored bricks. November hovers over the rowers, heading for the head of the Charles. It broke me to have you gone, pine cones ornamental on the common. Surprisingly bronchial this morning, the weather is contemplating winter, about to storm again into the city of the mind it never left. This is called Spring. There is a lark in my throat, and the mists of morning circle my hair, gray now silver. Then April's abysmal damp, summoned from every corner of the field, its acid greens, and hidden lizards cause the timothy to tremble. Clouds suspend harps of showers. The sun is scrying the shivering Celadon River, and hunger breaks the back of bombed-out Palestine. Here's one poem I'll read about Winthrop, and then I'm almost through. I grew up in a black house. Now, nobody grows up in a black house, but when the workmen would come and go to this hardware stores to get paint, they would come back and say, "You're right, it's not charcoal, it's black." So, I lived in a black house. That's the setting. This is called Lullaby of a Remembered Sea. Lilac, tiger lilies, crepe paper poppies of tangerine, peonies surround the koi pond with color and scent. Yellow and purple iris dance at the fence. Bleeding hearts commemorate the newly dead. This yard was designed by flappers after the war. Upstairs on wicker and chintz, in a beadboard sunroom, I am 11, lying in t-shirt and shorts, hungrily reading all summer Isak Dinesen, Grimm's, and Earl Stanley Gardner. Glasses of iced tea brimming with unshed tears, both lemon and sweet. I'm going to be a writer someday. I never want to leave this black house with the sea's lace and granite lullaby so near. Tides obey the moon, red skies return. Mist coming in the window comforts me like gauze. 60 years have disappeared. I slump at the elders' table, grinding what's left of my teeth. Daily at mealtime, I hear the mermaids singing of grandchildren, homes, and vanished husbands. I had none of these. When it rains in Brookline, I can't smell salt in the air and lose my way. I never feel sure just where on the planet I stand. The horizon tips. I urgently need to know. My pretty hands foxed like the books I read in childhood. What I did with my hopeful poet's life. Two more. This is called On Aging. The body says, "I am a fiesta," writes Galliano. The body says, "I am a galaxy," writes Domina. Nothing resembling fire is known to me. My body says, I've done without the simplest pleasures of touch. A back scratch, a hand held, an arm slung companionably over a shoulder. My body says, my tears have not been wiped away with tender thumbs. I haven't had a salty kiss or erotic embrace in years or all my life. My body says I've lost my eyelashes, have lackluster irises, a desiccated mouth. My body says these hands are claws. My body says I am a leathery wineskin, full of languid Sangiovese-colored blood that will not heal the heart. My body says I am a riddled skeleton from adamant sitting, sans yoga, tai chi, laps, steps, or weights. My body says I abide alone and always, full of yearning, of fluid, lymphatic, and elephantine, adipose flesh. Two references. This is describing all the parts of the ear. And in the ear is the smallest bone in the body, which seemed important to me as a poet to remember. Benedict of Nursia founded the Benedictine monks, and his what he lived by, the words he lived by were ora and labora, work and pray, and I've sort of taken those as my om. So this is called Profession. Robin's egg blew at 6 a.m. Ora et labora, wrote Benedict of Nursia in 500 AD from Monte Cassino. One palm crosses in front of the lips and meets the other hand's intentions. The entire world and all its suffering, a bright orange light caught between. What is the poet's occupation? To listen and to hear, to sound with a felted breath, the malleus, the hammer attached to the eardrum, the incus, its vibrating anvil, the stapes, stirrups connecting the middle with the inner ear, a membrane-covered opening called the, it's hard to believe, it's actually called the oval window, before which the soul kneels and listens to the lamentations of the mourning dove hidden beneath dew-soaked leaves in the vestibular labyrinth. Thank you. Thank you. I need a wheelbarrow. Thank you.
Into here now? Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, what to say of Charles Coe's accomplishment? His voice is one that has the demotic as its mask. He courts the reader like a friendly neighbor, your smartest relative, and brings them into awareness about the makeup of our social world, our social order, and the beauty there is in living in that order and in resisting it all at once. A poem in which a drunk white man has struck the family car and walked away scot-free. The speaker recalls being a child who knew it was unfair. But listen to this last image. Father looked at me a long moment, then turned back to the mirror without answering, razor slowly plowing the field of shaving cream. It's incredible. We have the history of that key American racial trauma, the subjugation of black people to white, in a single sentence, in 3 perfectly balanced lines. You can see the shaving cream, a white mask the father removes with an emblem of violence and hygiene, the razor. And he does this no longer looking at his child, but looking back into the mirror, forced to stare into his own eyes. The weight of social constraint and institutionalized racism, his burden to bear, even as he tries to protect his child from them. That description, though, doesn't do justice to the range of voices Coe is able to pick up and put down at his ease. Over the course of his selected poems, which, as Melissa said, we should all buy this very evening, you'll be surprised by how often you're laughing, as when you read his pithy haiku for apocalypse. Meteors and fire pouring down from scarlet skies. There goes the new roof. You'll be uplifted, you'll be sad, you'll be shamefaced, and you will be pleased. Coe's range gives us access then to that full catalog of human experience and urges us to pay attention. Charles Coe.
That Coe fella sounds like an interesting dude. I'd like to meet him sometime. Eric, thank you for that Hall of Fame introduction and for your hospitality bringing me up here. And Melissa, you rock. Another hand for Melissa, please. Deeply thoughtful and intelligent and serious work. Thank you very much. So I'm gonna, this book that just came out a few weeks ago as a new and selected, there are 20 new poems, I'm gonna read some of those, and 20 poems from my first 4 books. So it's kind of fun, and I've been enjoying introducing it to people. And I'm gonna start with this one, Prelude. Before we begin, may I ask you a question? Would it bother you if at some point I forgot to remember the illusion that we are made of solid matter? That we instead consist of atoms and electrical charges, or 99% empty space? Would it bother you to look through my suddenly spectral form and see the backrest of my chair? It wouldn't be intentional, a parlor trick. It's just that when I think about broken children lying in the rubble of bombed-out buildings, I sometimes find it difficult to remain tied to this world. So if I seem to fade, please don't judge or be alarmed. Just hold out your hand. We can touch palm to palm to keep ourselves connected to this terrible and beautiful place. Remind us that we are made of the same stuff as the stars. Yeah, Melissa, this getting old thing, it ain't for sissies, that's for sure. I think I was telling Eric when I got up the steps that when I was a kid, it was my cereal that went snap, crackle, and pop. So, in homage to getting older, this time next month, I will be 72 by a day. So we're still making it. So along those lines, I'm going to read this poem, This Tomato. This tomato. Tonight's dinner is a single tomato, a massive heirloom, ruby red, wrinkled, irregularly shaped, local, perfectly ripe, sliced thick, sprinkled with salt. I never bother with tomatoes in the off-season. Those billiard balls shipped cross-country, picked green, gas to turn them red. When the good tomatoes are done, my tongue's attention turns elsewhere. When I was young and waved goodbye to friends who'd packed their lives into cars and headed down the road, I always assumed I'd see them again someday. Some I never did, never will. I hope I'm here to greet next year's crop, but now I take nothing for granted. Tonight's tomato, this tomato, is an exercise in the ephemeral, a juicy vine-ripened reminder of time's blinking eye. How about, anybody ever see, are you all familiar with the Blind Boys of Alabama? Yes. The gospel group. I was pleased to see them in Somerville when I was working on this new set of poems. And so this is Sanctified. When the Blind Boys of Alabama kick into high gear, a hole is ripped in the fabric of the universe through which you will tumble to find yourself in a storefront Baptist church in Selma, Alabama, with no air conditioning, on the hottest day of the summer at Sunday service, where shouts pouring from the open windows are heard a block away. And Sister Hattie, whose magnificent hat is the love child of Mount Kilimanjaro and the Sydney Opera House, is fanning herself with one hand and with the other dabbing at the glow on her cheek with a lace hanky. Let's see. Yes, we're all familiar with the Norman Rockwell painting of Ruby Bridges, right? So in fancy poetry talk, when you write a poem about some other art medium, especially visual art, sculpture, painting. It's called an ekphrastic poem. You know, it's a good word, isn't it? I'm going to do a workshop on ekphrastic poetry. When I'm teaching a couple of MFA programs, and you got to talk about that stuff, you know. It gives you credibility. Yes, let's discuss iambic pentameter in the context of yeah, right. Shut up. So this is for Ruby Bridges. In the Norman Rockwell painting, Ruby Bridges, the problem we all live with, you are being escorted into the segregated school by federal marshals. We see 4 of them in the frame, 2 walking ahead, 2 behind, but we don't see their faces. You are the focus of the piece. A thrown tomato is smashed on the wall behind you. You walk straight ahead past the red guts dripping down and piled on the sidewalk, past the faint ghost of nigger painted on the wall someone tried with limited success to scrub away. Ruby, what can we possibly say about you? What words can describe this 6-year-old child armed with only a notebook and ruler, walking resolutely past that pack of jabbering hyenas, past the woman who every day threatened to poison you, past the woman who every day waved before your face a black doll in a coffin? The lead marshal said, "You never cried once during that nightmare year." What can we possibly say about you? Brave as any astronaut climbing into a tin can to be launched into the airless void. To the mother of a black son, he doesn't like you hugging him in public. Sometimes the music he listens to makes you sad. Where's the tenderness? You wonder, but say nothing. This man-child, taller each time he rises from his bed, who grows stronger by the day, whose veins flow with blood that busies itself building muscle and bone, is without realizing it already laying brick by brick the path that will lead him away to some unknown future. Some mornings when he's off to school and you tell him to be careful, he shrugs. If you try to speak of this world's cold truths about how quickly clouds can darken the sky, he might say, he already knows. But he doesn't know. And as you watch him walk out the door every morning, you pray the phone never rings with the news you dread. And this is haiku for George Floyd. That final moment when you called out for mama, did birds go silent? And this one, I will semi-apologize for the title. I couldn't help myself. This is Nocturnal Admissions. Yeah. Late at night, and I reluctantly shed the cocoon of blankets, rise once again to perform that task so familiar to men of a certain age. And afterwards, look for a moment in the bathroom mirror at the battalion of wrinkles whose comrades wait patiently to join their ranks. I look at my hair, what's left of it, mostly white as a sheet of typing paper, then shut off the light and go back to bed to burrow once more beneath the covers. But, as sometimes happens, sleep has climbed out the window, dropped quietly to the grass, and padded off barefoot into the night. At times like this, one's shortcomings and failures and disappointments return to take their bows, projected on the ceiling, images on parade. I nod to each member of the troop and accept each judgment in turn. Some debts I can never repay, others will never be repaid to me. But even though the list of things I thought I knew grows ever smaller and the tang of ancient griefs still linger on my tongue, I realize I've made peace with my past. And to my surprise, sleep returns. I awake to sun shining through the window, hear a mockingbird declare itself master of the universe. Now that my nocturnal ghosts have faded once more into memory and mist, I will rise to face this new day that stretches out before me like a ribbon of new highway. Thank you. Okay, I want to read a couple from the Collected. Let's see. Oh yeah, I want to read this one. Let me find it. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, here we go. I was washing dishes one time, and I was minding my own business, washing my dishes, and all of a sudden, this line came into my head. You know, sometimes you have a phrase or a line pop into your head, and you say, okay, I got it. All right, okay. So this is butt dialing Jesus. There was a time when voices emanating from my pants would have caused concern. But now I simply shrugged and pulled out my phone to hear a recording. You have reached the Son of God. I am currently speaking with another supplicant, but please hold. Your salvation is important to me. This was followed by music. I expected celestial choirs or maybe an elevator-friendly version of My Sweet Lord, but was instead treated to acoustic Delta blues guitar, interrupted soon by the voice of himself, greeting me by name and asking how you could serve. I was startled, didn't expect to actually get through. What's the one true religion? I asked, flustered, just to have something to say. All of them, he replied. None of them. I was taken aback. What? That's it? That's it. Follow the golden rule. Leave the campground cleaner than you found it. Look, anything else? I have a lot of people on hold. I had nothing and mumbled my thanks. He said, go in peace, and broke the connection. I put down the phone and stared out the window. The guy across the street was clearing snow off his sidewalk. Never really liked that dude, but I grabbed my shovel to go lend a hand. Thank you. It's funny because when I started writing that poem, the title's funny, and I was having fun with the conversation. But as it often happens, it kind of took a turn on me at the end there. It went a little place that, oh, okay, I see. This is one that I wrote when I was staying at the Manship House. This is Beast of Burden, an item from the Cape Ann Light and Gloucester Telegraph, March 8th, 1873. A block of granite was hauled to the Rockport Railroad Station on Wednesday that required 13 yoke of oxen to get it through the streets. Salute. Curious, but don't hold those in. Your eyes could pop out, and that would be embarrassing. I've got a little flashlight on my key. We could find them for you, but there's plenty of light in here. I think we're good. So, curious people lined either side of the dusty road, mesmerized by the slow procession. Oxen pulling a massive wagon that creaks and groans under the load, an ancient and eternal slab formed when the world was young that will outlast onlookers by 100 generations. It would be foolish to think these animals understand their role in history, that they know their load will grace some grand edifice of the young republic. They are simply beasts of burden who pull when prodded, eat when fed. But millennia ago, long before human masters with yokes and whips, their ancestors freely roamed the endless plains. Now, at night, lying asleep in barns, do they ever stir at the touch of some ancient memory, some timeless dream of fragrant, waving grass stretching beyond the horizon? Thank you. Thanks for the assist. Appreciate it. Let's see, let me read. Oh, okay. For the Africans on slave ships who committed suicide by jumping overboard, you had to plan carefully. Wait for the moment when a deckhand or first mate's attention was elsewhere before climbing quickly onto the railing to dive into the dark waters. Sometimes a few of you joined hands, gazed into each other's eyes a moment before leaping. After suicides, ship's officers would mourn. Each death reduced the journey's profit. Some of you believed you would rise from the sea, find yourselves at home in your villages once again, walking down the hills where you played as children, toward the smell of roasting yams and the sound of crowing roosters, loved ones celebrating your return as the morning sun licked salt water from your ebony skin. A few more. And after I finish, if folks have questions for Melissa and me, we'll be happy to chat. Miss Bob?
Sure.
Okay. This is Flight Interrupted. Late night at a subway station. I'm the only one getting off, no one's getting on, and I stand a long moment watching the train disappear down the tunnel. A solitary pigeon has somehow managed to navigate 3 levels from the street down to the platform and is walking back and forth along the tiles, cooing, head bobbing. As I move toward the escalator, it flies up to the ceiling, spooked by my nearness, flutters along the solid barrier, and finding no path to familiar sky, returns to pace the platform a little farther down. I make my way to the escalator looking for an employee to tell, but there's nobody there, never anybody there at night anymore. And as I reach the street and step into the cool air, my poet brain instantly chugs into motion. The machinery of metaphor rattles and cranks, hissing steam and spitting images as I consider the bird's plight. But as Freud might have said, this isn't a metaphor, it's a pigeon. A living, breathing creature with a beating heart like mine, trapped in a place it neither belongs nor understands. But the seed of a poem has already taken root. I'm already comparing the pigeon's dilemma to every creature constrained and bewildered by whatever invisible ceilings keep us from taking wing. So I'll close with a couple of sonnets. One that inspired me and one that I wrote in response to the one that inspired me. So this guy, what was his name, Willie something or other? He wrote a sonnet or two, and this is one called Sonnet 29, When in Disgrace with Fortune and Men's Eyes. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, happily I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day, rising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. And then I had an experience some years ago that I've had a number of times since then. And the first time it happened, I said, oh, geez, I got to write about that. And I try to write it in free verse, which is what I usually do. I'll write in form sometimes. I'll do villanelle or haiku or whatever. but it wasn't working. And I said, it needs to be kind of structured. It needs to be kind of old-fashioned. It needs to be kind of courtly and romantic. It needs to be a man out of his time. It needs to be a sonnet, damn it. So this is Sonnet for the Young Woman. He offered me her seat on the train. Oh, God. Your smile illuminates the gloomy morn. As sunshine warms a chilly mountain lake, before me sits a beauty not yet born when decades trailed already in my wake. You stir as if to rise and yield your place, but I return your smile and shake my head while hoping in the moment that my face will show no hint of all the thoughts unsaid. I could have sung your mother lullabies. Yet still a young man lingers in my heart who once delighted in a young girl's sighs. The time has passed for him to play that part. He read his lines upon a perfumed stage, but as they will, the years have turned the page. And I lied. One more really short one for any of us who want to start something and think, it's too late, I can't do that because, shut up. This is called Every New Thing. Every new thing is an act of treason, a betrayal of the comfortable, the familiar. An animal that's known only the cage will cringe in the corner if the door suddenly swings open, squealing on ancient rusted hinges. If I have one wish for you, for me, for us all, it's to remember that our own cages are locked only by the fear of change. That we have the power to shove the doors open, to take one step and then another into a new world. So,
Eric's going to do that. Why don't you folks come up here?
yes.
Let's move the set around. Get a couple chairs here. and then we can
Right on, right
talk. Melissa, want to come up here?
Sure. Oh, sorry. Don't ever get old.
Yeah, getting there.
We're making it. You can put your water here. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Cheers. Questions, comments, stock tips, recipes?
Stock tips. Now, there's a thought.
Well, thank you both so much, and this was a lovely evening, and kind of just what I was looking for tonight. And you both talked about getting old and the aches and pains of getting old. But as I was listening to Charles in particular, I'm very visual, and I'm looking around, and I see what's so funny on the wall. And then I'm listening to your poems, and your poems have a lot of humor, as Eric said, but like the best humor, there's a dark side under it. And I thought, well, this is rather appropriate, the whole thing. And you get a kick out of writing these poems, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm my first audience. You're your first audience, right? If you're not happy, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So if the poet ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So, but yeah, there's a lot of dark humor in life, and I think growing up African American, joy and terror, humor and horror are like two sides of the coin of the African American experience. It's the same thing in the Jewish community. It's the same thing in Ireland.
For anybody, really.
Yeah, any group especially that has been under the thumb of the machine, whatever the machine it is in whatever culture you're from. So that's a good question, thanks. How do you feel about that? Your poetry is very serious in a way, but there are these little moments of very sly and subtle humor.
I have a terrific sense of humor. You'd never know it. To use it doesn't come out on the page for some reason. It comes out of my mouth, but it doesn't come out on the page. So I don't know. Yeah, I have a sense of humor, and I find the whole thing hysterically funny and terribly sad. And if you don't laugh, if you can't laugh, you just can't live.
True. True. And I think that I greatly admire the Jewish tradition, intellectual and cultural tradition, because if there's any group that has the right to say life is entirely suck, it over the centuries it's been the Jewish people, but the Jewish humor and cultural output is just breathtaking. And like I say, in African American community, and when I was in Ireland some years ago, the tradition of literary excellence and the humor of people who went through a lot of bad stuff at the hands of the English is just it's breathtaking. Trish, and then
I have a question for Melissa.
Sure.
Breathtaking, Melissa. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Heartbreaking.
Thank you.
You write a lot about your body, and I get it. We're the same age. When you were a younger poet, did you write about your body then? I'm just curious.
I doubt if I did. I don't think so. I don't remember. I had hair down to my fanny, and I thought I was, there were moments when I thought I was hot ticket, but I mostly didn't think.
You are now.
Now that's funny. Actually, I don't think I thought about my body in those days. You just take things for granted when you're 25 or 35 or 45. You just think you're going to go on, even though you know you're not going to. You feel as though you could go on forever, and then one day you say, holy shit. My grandmother lived to be 101 and a half. And because I took such good care of her, who's going to take care of me? And she used to say, don't ever get old. And it's like, what is the option? What options do we have? We're lucky. I know this is not your question, but even though I talk a lot about my body and feel miserable some of the time, I feel it's a huge privilege to have lived this long, because so many people that we all loved, who should have had a long life, didn't get one. And so I feel really grateful.
well said. Oh yes, please.
Yeah, I had sort of an educator's question. I teach, on the college level. You mentioned you teach an MFA
A
program.
couple of MFA
Do you
programs.
also teach?
I did. I have it, and I had a salon at my house for many years.
Oh, lovely. I tried doing one of those too.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it is. But what I wondered is, what I've noticed among my students, many would consider me quite young at 34. In my students' eyes, I'm old. And, and they're 19, they look at me like, that's a totally different phase of life. I'll never get there. How do you bridge the gap? So much poetry and so much literature is about mortality and transience and how ephemeral life is. It's very hard to teach that to a 19-year-old, I find. I'm like, isn't that poem so beautiful? And they're like, because they're not even thinking in those terms of decomposition and.
At that age, you think you are going to live forever.
Truly. And I wonder if how you've managed to bridge that gap between them, or do you ever? I find it very challenging.
Please.
Sorry, no.
No.
I just keep hitting them over the head with it. I just keep saying, this is a beautiful, heartbreaking poem. If you don't get it now, you will get it someday. And they just keep bringing them all out, because those are the ones that move me. So I feel like if it moves me, it's on some level it's going to move them, even if they can't articulate it. So I just keep at it. I don't give up.
And one of the things, in addition to not giving up, I think if you relentlessly respect your students, that communicates with them. And I give a lot of writing prompts that help them mind experience. When I'm working with like high school kids, I will ask them, what's a defining moment from your childhood? And so that gives them a chance to talk about their lives in the passage of time. And then I ask, what advice would you give your 8-year-old self? And that gives them a chance to say, wait a minute, I was one way at 8, but I'm older now. There are things that I understand that I would say to myself when I was younger. So it's a multi-purpose strategy. It's a multifaceted strategy. And giving them good work and respecting what they do. I had a 6th grade girl. Now when you're teaching, there are 2 kinds of settings you can teach in. One is where everybody is in the room, is there because they want to be. And the other is you're in front of a class. You're like in front of a 6th grade class. And I had the kids writing poems, and they'd hand them up, and I would read them, and they'd have a chance to hear their stuff read by a real poet, grown-up poet. And there was this one little girl who was kind of like, yeah, right, whatever. But I don't push it. I just gave the assignment. They handed their stuff in, and I read her poem. Her poem, the prompt was, write about something you like. And the poem she wrote was, My Fish. I really like my fish. I'm not an only child, and when I talk to my fish doesn't interrupt. And everybody in the room laughed like we're laughing now. And she thought people were laughing at her for a second, but she got it immediately, that the people were laughing in pleasure. And I never saw her again. I don't know if she ever wrote another poem, but I know she had that moment. She had that moment. When I talk to my fish doesn't interrupt. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, a hand for y'all.
Thank you all for coming.
Fist bump.
Fist bump.
Thank you again so much, everyone, for coming out. A reminder that Charles's book is on sale in the back there. There are also ways for you to donate and give to the Gloucester Writers Center. We are a nonprofit literary center here on the North Shore, which brings great programs like this to people with no tickets, no cost. We try to make it available to everyone that relies on your kindness and generosity. Thank you again. Please mill around, have cheese and wine, talk about.
And a hand for the Gloucester Writers Center.